Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Crimson and in this video we are going to be starting our look through of the Sekiro Shadows Die Twice Official Artworks book. So Sekiro is one of my favorite FromSoft games. Bloodborne is my favorite game overall. However, in terms of actual gameplay, I prefer Sekiro, just based on its combat. And it's not just my favorite FromSoft game in terms of combat, it is one of my favorite games, period, in terms of combat. Now, the first video that I actually ever uploaded to my channel was the Sekiro mini art book. That book came with the collector's edition of Sekiro. It also came with a little statue of Wolf. I don't have him now, but I will bring him down for the next part, and hopefully, depending on when this goes up, I will have my Sekiro Nendoroid as well as my Genichiro Nendoroid, which I will show you guys. Whereas this book is a standalone book. So I'm very glad I got this. It's one of my favorite books that I have. What is actually cool about it is based on this being a Japanese book, and because it is because Sekiro is a Japanese game, it is situated in the Japanese reading format. So if you're familiar with reading manga, we are starting at the back of the book for us Westerners, but this is the front of the book. So there's not that much text in this book. It's mainly just pictures, but that's fine because the pictures are excellent. I have played through Sekiro. I actually think I've played through Sekiro more times than I've played through Bloodborne, just because I wanted to get all the endings and then do challenge runs and hit runs and stuff like that. And I actually played Sekiro on mouse and keyboard because I didn't have a controller at the time for PC. And then when I went back and tried to play it on controller, I found I could not play it. So I have only ever played Sekiro on mouse and keyboard, which is a first for me for FromSoft games. So with that out of the way, let's get into it, and I apologize if you hear my cat in the background. So, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice Official Artworks. So with the sleeve removed, we have a black and white cover of, again, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice Official Artworks in red text, as well as a black and white picture of Wolf kneeling to Lord Kuro. So let's dive straight into it. So this is again the picture that is on the sleeve of the book. Now, this art book is almost entirely environmental pictures. However, near the end of the book is where we have our concept art. So I thought that, I know it's a little bit out of order, but we should start with the concept art. So we are going to go ahead and start from here. So let's just get started. So starting us off, sorry, let me hold the page to so you add the glare isn't here. We start off with Lord Isshin and Ashina, who is the leader of the Ashina clan. He is also known as the Sword Saint. His martial prowess alone is what has made the region of Ashina independent from the rest of Japan. He is one of the most skilled sword fighters to essentially ever live in the world of Sekiro. And This is him during his, not necessarily youth, he is still fairly old, but this is him in his prime. You can see him here. He is in his battle gear and he is all bloody and covered in ash and muck and blood and everything. But yeah, very, very intimidating man and not someone to be taken lightly. He is missing his left eye due to a battle and he has a massive scar on it. He is alone the reason why Ashina is in the state that it is in terms of its independence. And fun fact, the Ashina clan were an actual real clan in feudal Japan. Now, I don't think they were as independent or as strong as they are depicted in Sekiro, and I don't think Lord Isshin actually existed, but it is kind of cool how they did actually incorporate a real world clan. Now, here we have a picture, two pictures actually. So in the beginning cutscene of the game, we see a massive battle unfurl, and this is where Wolf becomes a shinobi or meets Shinobi Master Owl. But we also have another cinematic of Isshin fighting another general. I'm assuming this general is from the Interior Ministry. And this general is massive. He has a huge spear, whereas Isshin is simply just wielding a standard katana. And despite his size, despite how strong he is, despite his weapon's reach, Isshin easily wins. He blocks an attack and then stabs him in the foot, and then as he kneels down, Isshin climbs on his back and shoves his sword into his neck. So this is what essentially, or this event is what gained Ashina its independence. So I'm assuming what had happened was the Interior Ministry and Ashina set up an agreement where they would each send one champion, and whoever wins the duel wins the war. And as it turns out, Isshin wins, so that's why Ashina is independent. Here we see the weapons that Isshin is using. So he just has a standard katana and a standard tanto. I actually have both a katana and a tanto that were hand forged in Japan in the traditional style. That cost a lot and a lot of money, but they are so well worth it. So I might show them when this video series is at the end, but I'm not sure. I don't know how YouTube feels with showing weapons. Whereas here we find the other general, and this is his size, this is his spear. As you can see, it has a massive cross guard and a kind of leaf-shaped bit on top of it. And as big as this general is, you can see that his spear is even taller than he is. So moving on from Lord Isshin, we have some of the Ashina soldiers. So these are some of the early and mid-game standard enemy types that we find. We have the more light armored samurai, as well as the more heavily armored samurai. These guys are obviously much more elite compared to these guys. Not going to spend too much time on them since they're essentially just your standard enemy type for this game. What is cool is you can see that they have the different types of faces that these enemies have, which is cool. I always like when games add different faces and features to standard enemies, because it's very it's very easy to feel like, you know, you're just killing and fighting the same two guys over and over again for 15 hours. Next up, we have the Great Shinobi Owl. So, Owl is the shinobi who finds Wolf on the battlefield and brings him in and raises him as his own and teaches him the Iron Code. However, during the assault on the Hinata estate, Owl not only fakes his own death, not only is responsible for the bandits attacking the castle, but also is the one who stabs Wolf in the back after Wolf defeats Lady Butterfly, and he believes that Wolf is dead. Keep in mind, Wolf is essentially his adopted son. But because Kuro saw the lengths and the bravery that Wolf went through to keep him safe, Kuro decides to give him his blood, thus making him part of the dragon's heritage and immortal. Down here we have young Wolf. So this is Wolf as a child, and this is the age in which Owl finds and adopts him. So at this point, Wolf is not a shinobi. Wolf is an orphan who is a battlefield scavenger, which was a common practice in feudal Japan, where people would go into battlefields and loot corpses for valuables, for weapons, for armor, and stuff that they could either use, keep, or sell. So, since Owl finds him, he brings him under his wing, no pun intended, and he becomes a shinobi. Next up, we have adult Wolf. As we see here, he is much older and much more different than young Wolf. So he has the same scarf that we saw young Wolf has. He also wears a similar orange clothing piece of attire. Very, very cool. This picture here has Wolf with the immortal blade on his back, as well as his sword. His sword, as you can see here, is called the Kasubimaru. I believe that's it. I apologize if I mispronounced that, but it is the sword given to him by Kuro. So Wolf treasures it more than his own life. This is the mortal blade here that Wolf finds about halfway through the game and is very integral story-wise. But yeah, these pictures of Wolf are very good. Wolf is also known as Sekiro. This is a name that Isshin gives him. So Wolf and Sekiro are essentially synonymous. So he is either Wolf or Sekiro. Both names apply. I'm pretty sure that it is only Isshin that calls him Sekiro, but I could be mistaken. It's been about 4 months since I last played Sekiro, so I'm a little bit rusty on the knowledge. I apologize. Here we have the sculptor. So this is what he looks like. He is an old man missing his arm. Very bitter old man. He carves the Buddhas, as he says, to keep his demons at bay. And he says that no matter how much he tries, his Buddhas always appear demonic. So he was the original owner of the Shinobi prosthetic, yet he gives it to Wolf. We have another picture of him here. This is more of a picture of his body. So you can see it's very old, very worn down, and yeah, this is a picture of him from behind. Okay, on our left here is a man named Hanbei. Now, Hanbei acts as a training partner for Wolf, who is in the same area as the dilapidated temple, which is essentially this game's hub. And what is special about Hanbei is he is immortal. So he offers his services, basically saying, hey Wolf, I can't die, so use me as practice for all of your techniques. Hanbei isn't an essential NPC. He's kind of useful in the beginning, but as you progress through the game, he becomes less and less so. He is very useful, though, if you learn a new technique or something, but nonetheless, he is a very cool character, and I like his design. He looks like a samurai who doesn't appear old, but has the look necessarily, I don't know how to phrase it, the energy of someone who's very old. He's been alive for, I don't know how long exactly, but a very, very long time. And he is just very tired of everything. Next up, we have Lord Kuro. Lord Kuro is the divine heir of the dragon's heritage. So while Wolf is semi-immortal, as in he can die but then resurrect, Kuro is fully immortal. Okay, next page. So here is some more art of Lord Kuro. This is him in some different clothing. There's this one here, which is, I believe, in his normal clothing, but just at a different angle. I apologize, this picture is very, very dark, and even with the brightness turned up, it's hard to make out. Over here, we have 3 pictures of Kuro. This one is him just in a white robe, which I think is really cool. And here is Kuro in what looks like his traveling gear. It's been a while since I've played Sekiro, and by a while I mean about 6 to 8 months. But I actually cannot remember if this clothing is featured in the game. What is cool about it though is he looks like he actually has a weapon on him, which I do not believe he has in the game, so that's kind of interesting, both just for lore reasons and some kind of implications. Based on him being the divine heir, it makes sense that he would want to carry some kind of weapon to defend himself. But it's kind of also irrelevant, seeing as he can't even be harmed except by the immortal blade. So here is Lady Emma. So she is the daughter of a man named Dogen, and Dogen was a master inventor. He was the one who invented a lot of our Shinobi prosthetic tools that we use in the game. So a very intelligent, gifted man, and his daughter Emma is a very gifted and intelligent healer. So currently in the game, She serves Lord Isshin, except she does not tell us this right at the start. She is one of the characters that we need to access multiple of the game's endings. She is also the character that we interact with to upgrade our healing gourd, both in capacity and potency. And I believe, I may be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. But if I am, please correct me in the comments. I believe she is the first kind of healer, health upgrade NPC that we have the option of actually fighting in a From Software game, and not just in like a little gimmick boss fight or someone that we can kill, but serving as an actual boss to the game, which I think is really, really cool. And here looks like some concept art of her. She has long, kind of pale black, grayish white hair, along with having her eyes bandaged. So this is very reminiscent of the Firekeepers in Dark Souls and the Lady in Black in Demon's Souls. She looks more like your typical From Software level up / health upgrade maiden. But yeah, I think this is really, really cool. And as much as I do enjoy this art, I think the way she turned out in game is perfect. She is also the one who kind of kicks off Wolf's journey, as she drops the pamphlet into the hole that he was dropped in, and essentially at this point he had given up on life. What's interesting about this art piece down here, I don't know if you guys can see, is she kind of has the same hair markings and scars as Wolf does. Wolf has black hair, but on one side of his head he has this massive patch of white hair. And here it appears Lady Emma has the same kinds of stuff going on with her hair. This does not appear in the game. She has black hair all throughout the game. However, this is really cool, and I think it would have been cool if maybe due to the Dragon Rot status effect, which affects NPCs, that maybe if you have Emma get sick and then cure her, maybe she was ended up being scarred like this or something. I think that would have been just a really cool change to the NPC, but I think she's perfect as is. Next up is the Divine Child. So there is a lot of lore and information about her. So the monks at Senpo Temple were trying to create their own version of the diviner of the dragon's heritage by kidnapping children and essentially subjecting them to horrific experiments, of which all of the children died except for her, and she attained some form of the immortality. So she can only be harmed by the immortal blade, and I believe she is immortal, but she does not have the dragon's heritage. She has the perverted, twisted version that the Senpo monks were trying to achieve. And she is very, very traumatized for, being a young girl kidnapped and sent to a mysterious temple, and also watching all of her friends and fellow kidnap victims die in horrific ways. And she is extremely important for one of the major endings of the game. Won't go into too many spoilers for that in case you have not played it, but she plays a very important role both in the game and in that ending. I think her appearance being very similar to Kuro's is a really cool idea, just showing that despite their differences in how they achieved their immortality, they are both immortal, and having them look very similar is very cool. This one is how she appears in the ending that I was talking about in the cutscene. But yeah, let's move on. And again, I know I've mentioned this a couple of times. I do not know what this Japanese text here says. I probably should actually learn to read kanji based on how many Japanese books and Japanese art books that I have, but currently I do not, unfortunately. So here we have a few different NPCs and characters that we meet along the way. So these characters here we meet in the flashback to the attack on the Hirata estate. We have two characters here which we meet, I believe, at the start of it. I believe this lady here is actually the first woman that we talk to who kind of tells us what's going on. Here is one of the merchant NPCs. Here is another of the merchant NPCs. We find him both in the flashback and in the normal timeline. He's a very kind of greedy, disgusting man. He is very glad and happy to brag about his participation in the assault in Hirata Estate. In the Hirata Estate flashback, he is the one who tells Wolf where to find the axe prosthetic. But if you actually already found the axe prosthetic and you talk to him and he tells you that, Wolf kind of says, oh yeah, I already have that, and it completely shocks him. But very kind of out for himself, vagabond type man. Here is two characters. We meet her in the normal timeline and him in both the normal timeline and in the flashback. So this is a man named Inosuke, and this is Inosuke's mother. So we first meet Inosuke in the flashback, which he is in this state here. Sorry, I didn't know the camera was so zoomed in. I apologize. So here we can see that his eyes are completely gone and missing. This is because he tried to fight Lady Butterfly. And if you know Lady Butterfly, she uses illusion. She uses illusion techniques, which are very dangerous and can cause blindness. So him trying to fight Lady Butterfly and being defeated left him blind due to the illusions. This is Inosuke as we find him in our main timeline. Much older, but is still permanently blind. His mother, who is this woman here, is also blind, not because of any injury, but just because of old age. And when we meet her, she is the one who gives us the bell to flashback to the assault on the Hirata estate. But she also, when we first meet her, she believes we are her son, Inosuke. And then we go and we can talk to Inosuke, who is a few feet away, and essentially just asks us to take care of his mother and to make sure nothing happens to her. He is a very minor character, but I think his story is very interesting, going from this brave warrior who's not only survived the assault on the Hirata estate, but attempted to fight Lady Butterfly, just being a standard samurai. I don't believe he's a shinobi. I believe he's just a standard samurai, or at least not a very skilled shinobi, if I am correct about that. If I'm not, I apologize. Here are some of the different enemy types that we encounter throughout the game. So we have the rats. These guys serve as spies for the Interior Ministry, and they also carry out the dirty work of the Senpo Temple. So these guys are the ones behind the kidnapping of children for the monks to experiment on. Here is one of the kind of twisted medics that we find in the underground tunnels beneath Ashina, who carry out horrific experiments on people. Very, they're not the toughest enemy, but they are definitely quite scary. So here is a character that we find in the Mibu village. I believe that's where we find him. And he is asking for some of the divine water when we meet him. I believe he is the headman of the village, and he is currently hiding. Once we travel to the divine realm and gather some of the waters, we can bring it back to him, and he happily slurps it down. And then he transforms into one of the inhabitants of the divine realm, these very pale, gaunt-looking creatures with almost like fish-like appearances. I think that's intentional based on them being turned by the water. The Mibu village in and of itself is a whole story, and a very interesting story. It's very Lovecraftian, but I'm not going to go into too much info on that. Just because in the other part of this video series, we will be covering the some of the different areas and locations, so I'm going to save that for when we get there. Next up is probably my favorite character in all of Sekiro, and that is Lord Genichiro Ashina. So he is the adopted grandson of Lord Isshin. Genichiro was born a peasant. However, Lord Isshin did adopt him. I believe it was due to his combat prowess and ability. He is extremely dedicated to protecting Ashina at all costs, even to the point where Lord Isshin wants to see him not succeed because he doesn't believe that protecting Ashina is worth the price that Genichiro wants to pay. So Genichiro is the man who kidnaps Lord Kuro. He wants Kuro to give him his blood so that he can become immortal and have the same abilities as Wolf does. He believes that obtaining that power is the only way for Ashina to survive the incoming invasion by the Interior Ministry. Some more information about Genichiro, and I'm not going to spend this amount of time on all of the characters. I just want to say all this about Genichiro because I love him so much. So, despite him being the villain of the game, if you watch the flashbacks and everything, and then the cutscene before the boss fight, even though he has Kuro, he never actually forces him to do anything. He just keeps asking, like, he's like, you know, Lord Kuro, can you please give me your blood? All the way through to the end. So it just kind of shows that while he is a deadly killer and all that, he's not evil. He just wants to protect his homeland, which I think is just a really nice touch. And also seeing as how Genichiro and Lord Kuro know each other. During the first boss fight at the start of the game, Genichiro says to Kuro that the last time we met was at your uncle's funeral. So these two are well acquainted. I think they actually might be cousins. That may be wrong, but if they are not blood relatives in some regard, or at least family relatives, since Genichiro isn't actually related to Lord Isshin, they're at least kind of tied in some familiar way. Over here we have some more concept art, some more art of Genichiro. So here is his bow that he uses. He has this massive bow which he uses in his boss fight, which is really, really cool. And then here are two swords. So the bottom one is the sword that Genichiro wields normally. And the second sword is the immortal blade that Genichiro attains. And it's really cool because throughout the game we were only ever told that there was one immortal blade. And then only if you pay attention to the later item descriptions do we find out that no, there's actually a second one, which is really, really cool. here is a picture of Wolf looking very, very beaten up. Again, this picture is very dark, so we see him at this stage. It looks like one of his eyes is missing in this one. And he currently has both his sword and the immortal blade. I believe this is actually one of the skins that you can unlock for Wolf in the latest and last kind of DLC that they added. So here is one of the first major bosses that we fight in the game, and if you have played the game, you already know this man's name, as he is not shy about telling it to you, but it is Gyobu Oniwa. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But yeah, it's kind of very funny. Every time you start this boss fight, even if you have failed multiple times, he enters the boss fight by screaming, "My name is..." So over here on the left, we have his horse, which he is riding. It's cool fighting a mounted enemy on foot. We fight him in a battlefield that is essentially the last bastion of defense for the Ashina castle, and we fight him. He is wielding this massive spear, halberd kind of cross. So a bit of information about Gyobu is he was initially a bandit chieftain, and he eventually ended up crossing swords with Lord Isshin, and obviously he was defeated by Lord Isshin. However, Lord Isshin noticed his combat prowess and made him the guard of the gate, which he takes very, very seriously. Like I said, his boss fight is in this massive kind of battlefield area, and it's essentially saying that so many people have tried to get through the gate, and Gyobu has killed them all, so he is extremely dangerous and an extremely skilled warrior. Definitely a highlight boss fight of the game. Here is Lady Butterfly. So she is the final boss in the flashback to the Hirata estate. She has 2 phases, I believe, and her main types of attacks are very fast attacks with her knives, as well as her illusion magic, which if you have snapping beans makes quick work of them. But she also is able to kind of make these illusion wires or ropes that she can stand on and kind of hide and then jump down on Wolf. What's interesting about her and the great Shinobi Owl knew each other quite well, and she was obviously involved in some part in Wolf's training, because if you die to her, she says something along the lines of, "Oh, you're still a pup after all, I see." So obviously she knows Wolf, or at least has known him since Owl adopted him and brought him back to the Hirata estate. Here is a concept art of her back, and this is some of her knives, I believe. These look kind of like a very elongated kunai. I'm not sure if this weapon actually has an official name. It probably does, but to me it kind of looks like a dagger equivalent of a kunai. A kunai is like a type of throwing knife that Shinobi would use, and this is just kind of an elongated version of it. Here is some concept art of her kind of smoking a pipe, which goes unbelievably hard. Really, really cool. And she also trained in the Valley of Illusions and stuff, so which is just another bit of interesting lore, and is another area that we visit that we will talk about when we get to the location section. Okay, here is everyone's favorite or least favorite boss, depending on who you ask. This is the Guardian Ape. So he is one of the major bosses that we need to complete the game, and for some people, the hardest boss in the game. He is a very aggressive boss because, you know, he's a massive ape, and he has this sword stuck into his neck. The reason, or some of his lore, is that because he is kind of situated at the end pool for where all of the divine water from the divine springs has ended up, him drinking it has made him immortal. Or at least immortal in some form. I'll get to that in a few minutes. So that's why he's able to have this massive sword jammed into his neck. So someone before our wolf tried to kill him and obviously failed. And what's most well known for, or about the ape in terms of the community, is From Software pulls a very, very funny joke with this boss. So all of the bosses in Sekiro have little red dots under their name, or their health bar, sorry. This showcases how many stages they have. So when we first fight him, he only has one stage, which gives the impression of, oh, this should be a relatively easy boss fight in terms of there's only one stage. So after we defeat him, we jump on his back and use this massive sword to cut off his head. His body falls, his head goes rolling, and we get the message saying Shinobi execution, which for Sekiro, that message only pops up when a fight has been finished. However, if you notice, even though this message pops up, the fog gate does not appear. Does not disappear. And then the ape starts to move again despite not having a head, and he picks up the sword that he used to cut his head off with in one hand, and he picks up his head in the other hand, and out from his neck sprouts a massive centipede. This centipede creature is what is causing his immortality. What's really, really cool about him as a boss is that the first phase he fights as an ape, or as an ape would. So at this point, he is still fully in control of himself. However, once the centipede takes control, he starts to walk on two legs and starts to use a sword. And his movements are very... what's the best term to describe it? His movements are very inhuman in terms of his swings, his style, his rhythms. So it's kind of cool that the centipede in him is almost trying to mimic human combat or human sword combat, but not quite getting it fully right. So it's just a bit more information on know about the centipedes that keep people, and obviously animals in this case, immortal. So we defeat him by draining his health bar, or his stagger bar once again, and we jump on his back and we stab the centipede and we rip it out of his neck hole, and that finally puts him down, for now at least. We'll get into that later. Here is just another picture of the sword that we used to defeat him. And here is another bit of concept art of the ape from a different angle. Here is the great carp that we find in the Divine Realm. Not going to spend too much time on this guy. He's not really a boss per se, but we are able to defeat him to get a massive amount of scales, which we can use at the carp vendor to unlock some very powerful items. And he's a massive fish, which makes an underwater chase scene in the late game very, very tense. And if you have thalassophobia or anything, it is a nightmare. Here is the Corrupted Monk. So the Corrupted Monk we fight 2 times. One kind of in the mid-game as an illusion version of herself, and the second time at the entrance when we first arrive in the Divine Realm. She is almost guarding the gate, I forgot to mention she is a woman. So she, and just a cool little bit of information about both Sekiro and kind of this time period in Japan. She uses a weapon called a naginata, which is this weapon here. It's almost like it's not quite a spear, but it's like a spear version of a katana, which is the weapon that women samurai in this period in Japan were trained to use. So it's cool that she uses this kind of weapon. It just kind of makes it a bit more historically accurate. She is a fairly easy boss fight, especially at this point in the game where most players are very familiar and good at the combat. What makes her challenging is that she has 3 phases, which is brutal. There is a way to cheese her. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't recommend cheesing her. I would definitely say fight her, even though you might get your ass kicked a couple of times. It is definitely worth the fight because it is a really good fight. And again, she is also kept immortal by the same centipede type creature that we saw in the ape and that we see in the Senpo monks. So here are 2 enemies that we find at the end of the Divine Realm. So this is one of the standard dragon type enemies that we find in the start of the boss fight. They are not very challenging in terms of fighting them. However, they appear in great numbers. I believe there's about 15 that spawn at once, and dealing with them can be quite challenging just based on numbers. But once you defeat all of them, the Divine Dragon, which is this enemy here, who is a really cool design. As you can see, he looks like almost a typical Eastern Dragon design, kind of built into what looks like a kind of tree or floral design area. And he has this really cool sword with all of these different spikes coming out of it. And he is the enemy that we need for essentially all of the endings. We need his tears as one of the key items to finish the game. So we defeat him. Unfortunately, he is a gimmick boss. The way we defeat him is he shoots lightning at us, and then we deflect back at him. We do this about 6 times, and then we defeat him and end the boss fight. What's cool about him is that we do not actually kill him. Once we have defeated him, Wolf essentially runs up to his head, cuts under his eye with the Immortal Blade, and takes the tears that comes out. So technically he is still alive, which I think is cool, and I think it would have been a tragedy to kill such a interesting and majestic creature. As you can see, he is missing his left arm. So at some point he obviously did battle with someone or something and was seriously injured. So when we fight him, he is severely in a weakened state. Here is some more art of the Divine Dragon. Here is him from a different angle, again showing his very serpentine type of look. This type of dragon I actually prefer to the more Western dragons. They just look more cool and more mythical in my opinion. Here is some different concept art of him. This is his head. I don't know if you can see this, but this is his head. And then here we have Wolf for a size comparison. So this guy is huge. And here is him from the side. I think this one of his head close up is a really cool image. And then here is him doing a roar or a type of bite, and it just makes him look even more menacing when you look at him in the game, he kind of looks not weak and not inhostile, but kind of just very neutral, and is almost fighting just to defend himself, and shows a bit of swordsmanship by using a sword rather than his abilities as a dragon. Whereas here we see some of his full draconic nature come into the front, which is really, really cool. I really like how they did his mouth and his jaw, showing the kind of scale type teeth that he has. But yeah, let's move on. Sorry, I do apologize. I did not realize how zoomed in the camera was for the last few pages, so I hope this is a bit better. So here is some more pictures of the great Shinobi Owl. So Owl is the Shinobi who adopts Wolf. This happens in the starting cutscene of the game. Wolf is essentially an orphan child who is scavenging the battlefield for stuff to loot, and Owl finds him and essentially sees that Wolf is not afraid to die at all. So Owl takes him under his wing and trains him to become a shinobi. Now, you might think by this that Owl is a very honorable man. However, this could not be further from the truth. Owl is a schemer and a plotter and is only after his own goals. He, in the ending of the Hirata estate, he kills Wolf after pretending to die and faking his own death. This is when Wolf is only saved by Kuro giving him his blood. Kuro does this seeing how essentially brave Wolf is, being the only one to actually come and rescue him from the assault. And essentially, even though Kuro wouldn't have died anyway, because he is immortal, still, under normal circumstances, Wolf essentially saved his life. And Kuro decided that this man is someone worthy of being my protector, and as such, he should get the blood because Wolf was dying. Owl has this massive sword. It technically is a katana, but it's almost like a katana with the width of a Western medieval greatsword, which is really cool. Owl is also huge, and I mean like absolutely massive. I believe he's the largest human character in the game, and we see him before our boss fight with him, standing next to Wolf, and Wolf maybe comes up to like his knee, which is hilarious. So one of the things that Owl tells Wolf is about something called the Iron Code. The Iron Code essentially goes like this, that the first rule is to always obey your father. And the second rule is to always protect and obey your lord. So adherence to one's father overwrites your adherence and obedience and loyalty to one's lord. So he wants Wolf, when we talk to him, to forsake his loyalty to Kuro and help Owl essentially take Kuro by force. And what he says to Wolf is, don't forget the Iron Code. I am your father. You are meant to obey me. And we get our first, I believe it's our first choice for one of the endings, where we can either say yes and obey the Iron Code, and if we do this, we get the Shura ending, which essentially cuts the game's runtime in half. Or we can choose to disobey the Iron Code and stay loyal to Kuro, which I believe is the main choice. And doing this starts our boss fight with Owl. Owl is an incredible enemy to fight. He is very skilled as a swordsman, but he is also a trickster and employs many types of tricks. He throws poison at you. He throws an item that makes it so that you can't heal. When you get him to a certain amount of health, he will fall to his knees and beg for his life. And if you fall for this, he immediately comes up. And if you don't have enough health at this point, can one-shot you. And yeah, very good fight. I believe that Owl is actually Miyazaki's favorite boss fight. Or favorite boss, because in an interview he said that his favorite boss is a trickster, and there's no other enemy really in the game that is a trickster except for Owl. Maybe Lady Butterfly, but those aren't tricks, those are more illusions. Owl's tricks are more like just kind of dishonorable fighting methods. So we ending up defeating Owl and killing him. And what is cool, or I think it's cool anyway, is that even though we tell Owl that we are not going to obey him anymore and that we ending up killing him, as he's dying, he essentially says, "That's my boy." So even despite Wolf's quote-unquote betrayal and his murder of Owl is still proud of him in the end, which I think is kind of touching. I mean, Owl's not a great person, to put it lightly. And there is also an alternate version of the Owl fight, which we can do by going back to the Hirata estate to unlock one of the endings. And in this fight, he is much harder, and he also has this spirit owl which follows him. The owl fight in the Hirata estate, in my opinion, is the hardest fight in the game. But again, it is so much fun. All of the bosses in Sekiro for me, despite how many times it takes, I have fun with all of them regardless. So let's move on. Sorry. So here are some more pictures of, so here is Owl. This is how we find him, except for the owl here. This is how we find him, or very similar to how we find him in the Hirata estate. He is leaning against a tree in a very similar position, looking very haggard and on the brink of death, and obviously he fakes his own death. Here we can kind of see the width of his weapon, and it's very jagged, as opposed to like a clean-cut katana. This is a version of Lord Isshin, which we fight if we choose to obey the Iron Code and stay loyal to Owl over Kuro. Here's some more artwork of Lord Isshin. So this is Lord Isshin at the end of the game. He is the final boss of the game, and in my opinion, the best final boss in any From Software game. So he dies right before the invasion of the Interior Ministry, which is probably what starts the Interior Ministry's assault, because they were essentially held back by Lord Isshin's combat prowess. But he comes back to life, or is essentially resurrected, due to Genichiro using the immortal blade on himself, and Lord Isshin kind of crawls out of his skin, which is a very gruesome scene. So Lord Isshin is back to his prime combat abilities. When we meet Isshin in the game, he is very, very old and is very sick. That's why he has Lord Emma in his employ. But this is him as he was during the initial war for the independence of Ashina, and as such he has the same combat prowess. So he has his sword, he also has a halberd weapon that he uses. This is kind of him from the back. Here's some more pictures of him, his face, both from the front and the side. He is missing his left eye, which I believe is due to a wound that he sustained during the fight for the independence of Ashina. And this is his firearm weapon, which is very, very funny. A lot of people think it's funny that he is known as the Sword Saint, except during his boss fight, I believe it's in the second phase, at random he can pull out just a gun and just shoot Wolf, and I believe the gun is like a one-hit kill. So just very, very funny. The gun itself is very ornate, and a very small detail, which I'm sure most people missed. I missed it on my first 5 playthroughs. The bench that Isshin is leaning on when we find him in one of the towers of Ashina Castle has the same ornamentation as the pistol does that he wields. So whether this is just from software kind of reusing a texture asset, or whether the weapon and the bench were crafted by the same person, I'm not quite sure, but either way, it looks so, so cool. Even though it is a kind of semi-period accurate pistol or flintlock pistol, he's able to fire it like 2 or 3 times in a row, which is just even funnier. There's a joke on the internet that, you know, instead of him being the Sword Saint, he is the Glock Saint, which I just find so, so funny. So here is Lord Isshin again. This is him as we find him in the game and as we fight him in the Shura ending. So during the game, we can talk to Isshin for advice, for lore, and stuff like that. And also, if you're lost, he kind of gives you hints on where to go. He's located in kind of this secluded tower that's tucked away. And he's very sick, very frail, very gaunt due to his illness. You know, you can see his hands are discolored. But in the Shura ending, this is the version of Isshin that we fight. And while he is still very powerful and a very dangerous foe, he is a shadow of his former self at this point. Which is kind of, it's sad in a way to see, you know, this great, great warrior still, despite his age, despite his illness, fighting still to defeat Wolf, because Wolf is becoming Shura. We'll get to what Shura is a little bit later. This is the sword that Isshin uses in this boss fight. So this is the Demon of Hatred. So this is the sculptor who we find at the dilapidated temple, who turns into this massive creature because he himself becomes Shura. The sculptor is a former shinobi who had extreme, I don't know if the anger issues or if he just had a deep hatred in him. He even says during one of the dialogues that, you know, no matter how much he tries, every Buddha statue that he carves comes out as demonic. And Shura is essentially this tale of someone who becomes so engulfed in hate, they become engulfed in flames and almost become a literal demon, and tries to end the world, or at least end Ashina. So this is the sculptor after he has become Shura. Again, very difficult boss fight. This fight is actually completely optional. You do not have to fight him. However, I would strongly recommend that you fight him. He is another one of the boss fights that some people say is the hardest. A lot of the difficulty for the bosses in Sekiro depend on which type you struggle with more. If you struggle more with the kind of swordsman enemies, such as Gyobu or Genichiro or Lord Isshin, they will be harder. Or if you struggle with the more bestial enemies, like the Guardian Ape or the Demon of Hatred, they will be a lot harder for you. Personally, I find these guys to be a lot harder, just because I find that the attacks are a little bit harder to gauge, and the camera for this boss fight is not the best, but it is a very cool fight. As the fight continues, he gets more increasingly aggressive and has more flame attacks. However, something I forgot to mention at the Guardian Ape section is the woman who the sculptor was in love with was killed and eaten by the ape. And once you defeat the ape, you get a prosthetic tool called the finger whistle, which is one of the techniques that she used. And if you use this prosthetic during the fight with the Demon of Hatred, it stuns him for a few seconds. You can do this up to 3 times, and then it stops working. If you use it a 4th time, he essentially goes into his 3rd phase aggression at the very start. It's very similar to the Father Gascoigne fight with the music box. Same kind of thing. You use it, it kind of reminds him of his humanity and who he was before and who he lost, which is very sad. But yeah, and this is another enemy where once we defeat him, he actually thanks us because, you know, one of the things about the Demon in Hatred is he is in constant pain, like extreme agony. So we are essentially putting him out of his misery and letting him rest in peace. So he thanks us at the end of it, which is both cool and very sad. These 2 guys here are some of the standard Ashina samurai that we fight. Both the katana wielding types and the spear wielding types. Here is one of the designs for some of the general boss fights. These guys have actually, and same down here as well. I believe these are actually 3 different boss fights. I can't remember the names of each of them. But they are very cool fights. They're not the hardest, but it is cool actually just fighting a standard mortal samurai general. And yeah, some of them have a varied array of weapons. Some of them use katanas. Some of them are more aggressive. Some of them are more honorable. Some of them have spears. And yeah, the spear enemy, both for the generals and the samurai, if you use the Makiri counter, they essentially become a cakewalk and you can defeat them very easily. Here are some more enemies. So these are some of the slashing type enemies that we find. Very similar to the centipede boss that we fight. They have these kind of tri-claw type weapons that Shinobi actually did use in real life. Obviously, they were not half centipede monsters, but these guys flail like crazy when you fight them. And initially they're very challenging, but then once you get the rhythm down, which you probably do in your 2nd attempt, if not the 1st attempt, they are a piece of cake. These guys here are they start out as a boss, and then I believe later on they just become a standard enemy. These are Shinobi hunters. So these men are specifically trained to hunt Shinobi. That's why they wield this massive spear type weapon to kind of keep the Shinobi at a distance. But again, if you have the Makiri counter, they are extremely easy. If you don't know, the Makiri counter is a technique that you can unlock where you can counter an enemy's thrusting attack by stomping down on the blade and causing them massive stagger damage. Up here is one of the enemies that we fight in Senpo Temple. They are extremely aggressive and they have this really cool weapon. It's like this this double-ended, I don't even know what I would call this. It's like a mixture of like a scythe and a hatchet, I would say. I'm probably wrong about that, but that's just the way it looks to me. And they have a hat that is very similar to the rats, which, seeing as both the rats and these guys, I can't remember their name for the life of me, are both tied to Senpo Temple, it kind of makes sense that, you know, their attire would be somewhat similar. Here we have the first, is it the first boss? Yes, it's the first boss that we fight in the Hirata Estate flashback. This is Juzo the Drunkard. He is essentially the leader of the pack of bandits that attacks the Hirata Estate. He is obviously a alcoholic due to his name, and he actually uses his sake. In the boss fight, he has this move where he pulls out this massive flagon of sake and drinks it and then spews it at you. But again, he has a huge, huge sword and is quite difficult due to being surrounded by lesser enemies. And there's actually an NPC that I can't remember his name that we can enlist to help us. And it's very difficult to keep him alive, but whenever I play, I always do my best to keep him alive. But yeah, cool enemy design. Very gives off that kind of disheveled mess of a man who's left to banditry despite his skill. So yeah. Okay, so here are some enemies that we find, or not just enemies, but NPCs and bosses that we find throughout our journey through Senpo Temple. So here is a woman, a very old woman, who has seemingly gone insane that we can talk to briefly. She gives us a hint about how to access a secret area. Here is another type of enemy that we find throughout the game. These are the enemies that act as the alarm bells for the stealth areas. They are very weak, they die in one hit, but if they spot you before anyone else spots you, they start banging on this pan, and these guys are a total pain to deal with. So this is a boss that is not quite a gimmick fight, but at the same time is not a standard fight either. He is the Armored Warrior. So he has traveled with his son from the west, as you can see, from his knight armor and his western greatsword. So he is obviously a western knight. His son Robert was extremely ill, so he traveled to Ashina with his son in hopes to save him by giving him to the monks of the Senpo Temple, obviously not knowing the monks' true intentions. So he believes that he is guarding the bridge and protecting Robert. Since he is clad head to heel in plate mail, we can't actually kill him. We can take his stagger bar down, but we can't actually do any damage to him. So we fight him on a bridge with very flimsy wood panels on either side. And what happens is when you stagger him, you get the option to jump on him and kick him. So you have to try and stagger him in a position near one of the windows or one of the openings in the bridge. And you have to stagger him there and then walk around to the front or the side, whichever is the best position, jump on him and kick him off. And he falls to his death. And as he's falling, he screams, "Robert." So he's obviously, despite being a boss, he obviously seems like a very good man. He's here to save his son, and he's trying to keep us out to stop us from interfering with his son's quote-unquote treatment. Here are some of the enemies that we find throughout the game. So this is an enemy that we find in the underground section of Ashina. Here is one of the large type brute enemies. These guys are very damage spongy enemies, and they are very fat. They almost look like sumo wrestlers. They carry these massive mallets. I believe there's a Japanese snack or treat that is made by using a similar mallet. I can't remember what it's called. Here we have the Demon Bell, which we can find later on in Senpo Temple. This is something that you can ring, which increases the difficulty of the game, which is not recommended for your first go, but is definitely worthwhile doing later on. Here we have some more of the doctor type enemies that we find. These guys have a much more a cloaked design, and they have this little blowgun, so they shoot you and try and poison you. Here is another picture of some of the rats. As I said, the rats act as the spies for the Interior Ministry, and that's why they're called rats. And Lord Isshin is sneaking out of his hospital bed and is hunting these guys down, which is so funny that this old man who gives off this appearance of being so frail and so sick puts on a Tengu mask and then goes on essentially a massacre for these guys. I don't know why I find that so funny. Also, I apologize if I'm going through these last couple of pages very quickly. It's just my phone is at like 10%. So I gotta try and get through this quick. So this is the massive monster or creature made of what appears to be yarn, who transports us from the marriage casket, which we can find late in the game after obtaining one of the flowers, and he transports us to the divine realm. I'm actually not entirely sure what the lore on this guy is. I do apologize for that. But yeah, he's very cool, extremely massive, and is almost a very mythological looking creature or enemy type. So here we have the Senpo monks. So these are the monks that inhabit Senpo Temple, and while not all of them use swords, most of them use just martial arts, which is some of the techniques we can find. These include, punches, kicks, flying kicks, really cool moves. They're not the best for a wolf to use, even though he can unlock them, but for them, they are really good. Here is some more of the monks. These are them in the later stages of gaining quote-unquote immortality, and they have the same centipede creature that is this. The centipede is what grows in you if you partake of the divine waters. So I have mentioned this centipede a couple of times for the guardian ape and for the corrupted monk, but this is the first time we've actually seen an image of them. They are horrific and quite terrifying in their appearance, but I think that's kind of the point, just to show you how disgusting it would be to have one of these things inside your body. And as you can see, they are not small at all. So for, a normal man, if you look at this man here, despite him sitting down, this thing lives inside of him. So you can only imagine like the pain that this guy would be in having this thing wriggling around in his insides. But the monks see it as a way to gain immortality, so they are completely fine with it. Okay, moving on. Here we have some of the the 4 monkeys that we have to fight in the Divine Realm that gains us access to the Divine Child. These guys are quite an annoying boss, if I'm being honest. It's a cool concept, but it's not really the best fight. They're very gimmicky, you have to trick one by using sound, you have to trick one by using sight. There's one that you just have to rush down, and there's one that's actually invisible right behind you when you spawn into the location. So these guys here are called the Headless, and they are an enemy that we can encounter very early in the game, but they are not meant to be dealt with until much later. We need a lot of divine confetti. I believe there's 3 or 4 of them in them, and what makes them worth dealing with is there's an item multiple items that are different sugars which grant temporary stat boosts, like increased health regeneration speed, increased stamina regeneration speed, increased attack power, but these are consumables. However, every time we defeat a Headless, we gain the same ability as the sugar that we use, except one, it is more potent, and two, it is actually an art that we can unlock, which we can use infinitely, provided we have enough spirit emblems. So here are two different enemy types that we can find in the Fountainhead Palace area. This is the area that is located in the Divine Realm. So these guys here are the Palace Nobles. These guys are very weak, very frail, and not able to attack you, attack you and deal really any kind of damage. However, they are able to submit a spell on you, which drains all of your health and gives you the enfeebled status effect. Enfeebled means that you cannot walk. You can like barely move, but if you're enfeebled, you're essentially dead. And then they rush you and hit you with an extremely devastating attack. These women here are the Okami warriors. These are kind of the warriors of the Fountainhead Palace, whereas these guys are like the noble caste. Sorry, let me zoom out so you guys can see them. That's my bad, I apologize. This is what they look like here. So the Okami warriors, being all women, use the Naginata, which again is very historically accurate. Very dangerous enemies. They have extreme mobility. They dodge, they jump, they dance all over the place. And they are also able to cast lightning, which is a very dangerous status effect, except being able to, Wolf is able to parry it if you jump when the lightning hits you, and then you can reflect it back at them. There is a character mentioned in a lot of the lore, and she is called Lady Tomoe. She was a master of this lightning technique, and she was the one who has taught Lord Genichiro this technique. She was essentially his master when he was still in training. It is never actually specified, but it's insinuated that Lady Tomoe was an Okami warrior from the Divine Realm, based on they are the only enemies that can actually wield the lightning. They are also all female enemies, and Lady Tomoe, both being a female and someone who can wield the lightning and be able, and be skilled enough to be able to teach it, kind of hints that she came from the Divine Realm herself, which is very, very cool. I wish we actually got to meet or fight Lady Tomoe in some way. Not going to spend too much time on these guys. So here is the Blazing Bowl, everyone's favorite enemy type. Everyone's favorite boss. I jest. It's one of the most frustrating bosses in the game, despite being, fairly simple once you get the hang of it. It's just his moveset and his hitbox is crazy, so it makes it very challenging. These are some of the enemies that we can find in the dungeons. As you can see, they have very cruel looking weapons and are very sick and elderly themselves. This is one of the enemy types. So this enemy is one that we find throughout the game. We can find them first off in the Hirata Estate flashback, and we find them more and more throughout the game. They are the Interior Ministry Ninjas. I believe that's what they're called. They may be the Interior Ministry Assassins or Shinobi, but they serve the same function. Extremely dangerous enemies, even late in the game. And when you first encounter them, they absolutely wipe the floor with you. However, for the most part, once you defeat them, they don't come back. So they're almost like mini bosses, and they are so much fun to fight. Not at the beginning. At the beginning, they are quite frustrating. However, as you continue the game and get better at the combat, they are so much fun to fight, in my opinion at least. Here we have some of the inhabitants of the Mibu village. This is a village that had been tainted by the divine waters, so all of the villages kind of became, started like this cult-like behavior and all became obsessed with the waters. If you dive deep into the waters, you can actually find some slugs, and I believe it's meant to be that these slugs have drifted down from the divine realm. The way the divine waters work is they start at the Fountainhead Palace in the divine realm, and the kingdom of Ashina, the territory of Ashina, is located somewhere beneath, or at least in the same vicinity as the Fountainhead. So the water flows down and down and down and creates multiple rivers, lakes, ponds, and eventually stops where we find the divine ape. However, the guardian ape, not the divine ape, I apologize. But the Mibu village had their water supply tainted by the divine waters without them knowing. So they started to transform into these kind of half-human, half-fountainhead noble type creatures, which is why they look very pale and sickly, almost inhuman. Here is a boss that we fight, and she is in my top 3 bosses in the game. This is a ghost type or a spectre type enemy called a Rin of the Waters. When we first find her, she is standing alone playing her instrument, and she asks us if we know where her husband is. And you have the option of saying, like, yes, we know where he is, or no, we don't know where he is. But either way, she gets angry and starts attacking us. She is not the hardest fight in the game, but she is not a pushover either, being a kind of spectre ghost type enemy. Divine confetti is very useful. She has this kind of long dagger that she uses, which is really cool. And I just find her character design, her appearance and all that really, really cool. And she has this kind of like basket covering her face. So I think the implication is that she was once beautiful, but then, given her name, Rin of the Waters, maybe she drank some of the water near the Mibu village and something happened to the top of her face, or she was injured in some other way, which is very, very tragic. And how even in death, she's still playing her instrument, waiting for her husband to come and find her. These guys here are just more of the standard Ashina samurai. These are more of the standard enemies that we fight out in the field, whereas these are the samurai, which are much more elite and much more skilled, that we find inside Ashina Castle itself. So these guys are much, much stronger, whereas these guys serve as the basic enemies of the game. Some of them have katanas and clubs, some of them have shields, and they all come in various states of clothing. This guy here has a little tanto on his belt. This is the chained ogre boss fight, and he is one of the first non-human enemies that we fight in the game, and for a lot of people is one of the hardest early game fights, just based on the area that we fight him in. We mainly fight him on a staircase, and this can affect some of the hitboxes. A lot of his moves are body slams, tackles, grabs, and kicks, which the elevation of the stairs can mean, even though you appear to be out of range, or kind of to the side of an attack, it will still connect. And his grab attack, if you are positioned incorrectly, can lead to him just chucking you off the side of the map and instantly killing you. So, very fun fight, but for a lot of new people who play the game, he is one of the hardest fights for the early game. Now, here is some of the final enemies that we fight in the game. These are actually the last enemies that we fight. These are the samurai and the soldiers of the Interior Ministry. So the Interior Ministry has been trying to retake Ashina for a while, and they were only kept at bay by Lord Isshin, but at this point when they appear, Lord Isshin has already died. Thus, they begin their full-on frontal assault of Ashina, not just the castle, but the entire territory as well. The Interior Ministry is essentially meant to be like the main Japanese government. If you remember that Ashina is its own independent state or independent kind of country and is not officially part of Japan at the start of the game due to Lord Isshin fighting for its independence, they want to take it back. So they come with a variety of enemy types. Here is the standard samurai type enemy. They dual wield katanas. They have a firearm on their back. I believe this is some kind of rifle. These guys here have kind of one short sword. I believe this is called a wakizashi. If I mispronounced that, I apologize. This is a kind of cannon that they have, but it's almost like a flamethrower. It's not flames per se. It's almost like a firework launcher, but they used to light the buildings on fire because the Japanese buildings at the time were made of essentially, very flammable materials like, thin wood and paper. They have this really cool looking, almost lacquered red armor, which is really, really cool. Which is really, really cool. The helmet that I actually own has a very similar look with the red lacquer on it, except instead of red, it is black. And there's loads of there's loads more types of enemies that we find, There's the rat enemies that are now kitted up fully in the red armor. And there's the Interior Ministry Assassin, which are garbed in purple robes, which we covered a page ago. And then here is another boss for the Interior Ministry, very similar in design to the boss Juzo the Drunkard, except he is a Interior Ministry, or a servant of the Interior Ministry, but he is one of the captains. And despite his size, moves extremely fast. He does have blue robes in this picture. However, there's another version of him which he does have the red attire of the Interior Ministry. The Interior Ministry enemies are my favorite standard enemies in the game. Their appearance is amazing, their weapons, their armor, and they're just so much fun to fight. They're a very, not standard, but like they're the best of the best samurai enemy types that we fight in the game, and they are so much fun. And that, everyone, is going to be the end of this video. So, we started at the back of the book because I wanted to cover the character concept art and art first. However, in the next video, we are going to be covering some of the weapons, the Shinobi prosthetics, and looking at some of the environments. The way the environments are paged out is it starts with the environments that we find early on in the game and progresses kind of in sequence to how we encounter them in the game. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this. Sekiro is one of my favorite games of all time and my second favorite From Software game, and just having any excuse to talk about this game is always a joy. So if you are watching this video while relaxing or trying to fall asleep, this is the end of the video, so I would recommend clicking off. I'll give you guys a few seconds. And for the rest of you, I just want to say again, thank you so much for watching. As always, your viewership means the world to me, and I will see you guys in the next one. Crimson out.